Okay, it's turn 19, and yeah, this wasn't great. So one of the unfortunate facts about Dominions is it takes a bit of time and energy to focus on, and unfortunately, turn 19 corresponded with the time where something was going on in reality. So I stepped out for a moment and let my teammates handle the turn. The problem was when you're the one doing a lot of the diplomatic dealings, it's easy to lose track of things. And one of the things that we lost track of this turn is that it turns out that in turn 18 we received some communications from Lanka. And Lanka, who understands where we're coming from in terms of occupying some of our land, but its land, but not being a major threat to them. Well, Lanka essentially said, look, you guys had said that if I started to pull things together, then I'd be allowed to push back. And right now, I need to push back a bit. In particular, I need to be able to take my throne that you guys are currently standing on, because I want to be able to use the Bless in order to boost my Palankashas. And if you step back, then we can keep this thing relatively contained, relatively controlled as a war. This sort of halfway war I was talking about, we're pushing, sure, but we're not pushing as hard as everyone else, so we're not prioritized for smacking. And unfortunately, because I wasn't around, all Lanka got was silence. Now, if I had been around, I think I would have been able to establish an arrangement whereby they backed off, or at the very least my allies knew the threat was coming so we could prepare for it. But as it was, my allies received no warning, and Lanka received silence, which they took as a declaration that, the gloves were coming off and they needed to make a statement. So Sparkles the Bull made a statement. This is Sparkles the Great White Bull, god of Lanka. Not god, disciple of Lanka. Sparkles is an E5, S3, N2 Great White Bull with 4 experience stars and a shock resistance, fire resistance, regen, and blood surge bless. So Sparkles is casting personal regeneration, giving Sparkles 40-something regen points per turn. Sparkles is automatically blessed because he's in Dominion. And what's he going to cast next? I think Luck. Yep. And then are we going to get a protection buff? Iron Skin. There we are. So protection 20 already. Sparkles will berserk and go to protection 25 with 44 regen, high statistics, and being a size 6 trampler. And if that all, and is resistant to most elementals. On the other side, you have the Therodian army that was just hanging out, protecting the fort that was under construction. That we thought we were going to be able to keep anyway, with no other protection, because they had no clue that Sparkles was coming their way. Because it was always our understanding with Lanka that if they had a problem with how far we were pushing and they wanted to make a real fight of it, they'd come to us first. Well, that didn't happen. So Sparkles, thinking he had been spurned by the underwater bastards, came in and made a statement. Now, sure, an Ichthyor warrior hits for 19 damage that is piercing, so we'll go through Sparkle's armor. But not by much, and not often. Attack skill 8 is not going to hit Sparkles all of the time, and Sparkles is still regenning 44 hit points per turn. So you can see they're landing hits, but then that 44 regen procs. And every time Sparkles tramples, well, you can probably see how this is going to end. See if they can find out if they got Sparkles down at all. They did indeed run Sparkles down quite a bit. And by quite a bit, I mean about 10% of Sparkles' maximum hit points. Anyway, this continues for a while. A painful while. Because this is basically Therados' army at this point. Obviously no mage support, because why would we need mages if we weren't going to fight Sparkles? We've already fought Palankashas before, and we've won every time, but this is different. This is Sparkles, the Great White Bull, who, with his incredible map move, was able to come in and destroy our army in Andoria. So we lost 22 Ichthyd warriors, 15 Ichthyor warriors, 9 Curates, and a collection of ghosts, as well as the fort that was under construction, and all of the valuable gems that sat in Andoria's throne province. So that sucked. At the same time, the Lankan Palankashas came out of the capital and attacked a small Atlantean army that had been sitting here, again, just holding position, getting ready to move into blue water, 35, not expecting a full counterattack. Because again, we were of the understanding that we'd get warning if that counterattack was going to happen. In part, this was also my fault coordinating my team because I was off elsewhere. So not having heard otherwise, my team actually assassinated a leader in Lanka, which is one of the actions that was pissing people off. In this case, they actually assassinated a multi-hero, which is bloody awful. So now the situation we find ourselves in is Lanka has counterattacked thinking we spurned them. We've lost Therados' army and a small Atlantean force. The main Atlantean armies are off elsewhere. Don't worry about the main Atlantean forces. And a few Therodian reinforcements are available. We've lost the Throne Province. We've lost a fortress that was under construction, which represents all of Therados' income for a turn at this point in the game. We've lost the gems on it, and we've lost our strategic position. So now what happens is a really awkward conversation, which I'm going to have with Lanka, which is, so we didn't actually mean to start this. This is what was happening. I was off elsewhere. However, we're now very weak in negotiating because they've destroyed our forces at the front. They could roll us back up if they really wanted to. Help is a bit far away. And the only thing that I think is going to save us is the fact that they want to come over here and save Yomi. So it might be that we're able to work out a situation whereby if we accept the new borders and don't push for a while, they'll instead go and deal with Pangea rather than running on a death ride through Therados, which is entirely possible at this point. Sparkles is not killable by anything that we have available to us at this point, especially in his Dominion, and his Dominion dominates this area. So, that was a problem. That's a big problem. It affects gem income, it affects army size, it slightly affects province counts, but really it is the loss of our armies, and in particular all of the siege strength that the Therodian army represented, because those 82s were good siege units. Any threat that we pose to Lanka itself is now gone. So it's now more important than ever that we negotiate this to be a limited war. And the problem is we're doing that at the same time everyone else is having full-on wars and making ground elsewhere. It's really quite problematic. The only thing I will say is that it frees us of any immediate obligation to get involved in Elf War conflict, because our offensive capability just got completely freaking pasted, which is problematic. My armies are still busy cleaning up Indies. I've still got to clear barbarians off 227, and then maybe I can move up reinforcements. But I may have to end up sending the Pelagian army north to compensate for the fact that Therados just got wiped out. Anyway. Meanwhile, what else is happening? So, Varnheim is pushing deep into Saramatia. Saramatia's capital is under siege. Akesta 139 is under siege. 173 is under siege. This may be all of Saramatia's forts this turn under siege by Varnheim. Unfortunately, Varnheim can't be everywhere at once, which means that there's no immediate counter to the fact that Rus is continuing their cleanup of Team Lanka, Yomi, Femoria. This may be one of the reasons why the elves are doing okay so far. Even though Archocephali took really heavy casualties, lost their homeland, lost a lot of their sacreds to Lanka, Yomi is still dominating Pangean resources, although the fortress is cracked, so expect an assault there soon. We're going to keep that scout there to watch that. And Femoria is under siege, albeit not cracked at this point. This means that Team GC is probably going to net themselves 2 capitals without fighting major engagements with the elves, and then be able to roll in. So the fact that Team Chris is already taken Archocephali and is in a position to, in a few turns, threaten Tir na Nog, look, none of it's ideal. And the fact that the team that's getting beaten up the most is the team that we are most closely aligned with. So, Foxy and Galzon and Sinwa, they're good friends of ours at this point, which is, it's good to have friends in a game. Unfortunately, the 2 closest allies we have are the elves, who are being coalitioned and who we are being pressured to intervene against, and this team over here, who are still getting pasted by the elves and are in a war with them, which makes our diplomatic situation all the more difficult. If ever there were a time to be very, very quiet and hide underwater and try and talk your way out, it's turn 19 of this game. Because bloody hell, what do you do about a ball like that? Anyway, it's my fault for not I had to leave quickly. I wasn't able to give people a full brief. I wasn't able to hand over conversations properly, and as a result, miscommunications happened. You see this continue in turn 20 before I finally get things back under control and we return to our plan. But for the moment, apologies Theranos, apologies Atlantis. I blame myself for the fact that you lost armies without warning in a situation that you thought was under control. What else are we doing? Well, we did move up and take one province from Lanka this turn, continuing our limited war approach, whereby we assumed that the bull would be off fighting over here and wouldn't prioritize Great Barrier 24. So we moved in and took that. We'll see how tenable that is in the context of the negotiations that are now going to have to happen over what happens with this bull and these Palankashas and Sacreds and this war in general. Anyway, we'll see what happens. I'll work it out. My overall assessment is the elves are doing really quite well on this front, but are vulnerable on this eastern front. So we're actually probably hoping that Basilia's Basil is able to put up some resistance to Massacre Agartha, because otherwise that force is just going to become unstoppable as they carve out this entire territory here. Arcoscephali was quite large. And then we end up, as I've said before, with a superpower situation where we have a superpower team Chris, a superpower team GC. One of them attacks just the periphery of the other and wins the game. You guys don't want this game to end by turn 30, right? Especially not before Team Underwater has gotten started with its plots. We haven't even gotten started with our memeish plots yet. Heck, I'm barely surviving underwater as it is. I've only got Dominion in 2 provinces, right? So, there we go. We have plans. I'm going to go over them shortly when they become relevant. For the moment, this is the turn of the Sparkles Massacre. This is the turn where the Great White Bull came and reminded us, hey, you guys are a bunch of shitty underwater nations, and you have no business being on land if land nations desire to kick you back into the sea. Sucks to be reminded. See you in turn 20. Alright, it's turn 20, and things continue to go downhill. Sparkles has claimed the Throne of Fire, which we understand is an attempt to give an attack bless to all of their sacreds as a nation, so allow resistance to be a little bit more practical. That's mostly for Palankashas, because Fomori is out of the game, and I'm pretty sure Yomi is in trouble as well. We searched for magic sites, didn't find any. Ultimate Smithing Minion, the ruler of Therados, has woken up, and this is one blessed benefit that we have. Because as you've noticed by now, we're imprisoned. We've gone with imprisoned pretenders in a disciples game. Who does that? And the answer is people who think they can hide underwater until the worst is over if they need to. Ultimate Smithing Minion is a Telkeen God King. And Therados has been going for the paths they need to make it really deadly. So we're now in a position now where fighting Sparkles is difficult, but with some gear, not impossible. It is absolutely possible with the paths we have on that Telk and a little bit of research to get probably a mist-formed, quickened Telkeen with a great sort of sharpness and quickness to chop down Sparkles, or other weapons like that, to chop Sparkles down. It's possible. And that is the negotiating tool we desperately needed. So that is there. So I'm going to try and resolve, and have at this point, I believe, yes, at this point I have resolved an end to the Lankan conflict, in the sense that, not that the war is over, but in the sense that Lanka will not advance any further. They have reclaimed a bunch of territory, they have claimed a throne, the Palankashas have claimed more than a few casualties and heads, and they've avenged the initial victories Atlantis had over them, and they are now in a position where they can return home. What else happened this turn? Yes, Yomi came out to fight, in a small way at least. They brought a couple of their Oni out, and they brought a Dione, who is blessed, but, not exactly geared or anything. The blessing of the shock, the fire, the magic resist, the regen, blood surge, you know the bless by now. But one Dione against all of the Pangean army? Problematic. Especially when you have these guys. The one thing I'll say is that you did have this situation where these great sort of sharpness anti-thugs did run into the Oni first, but I don't think any of them died. Anyway, so you now have a Dione who would be able to fight a fair number of White Centaurs, that's true, and maybe fear them off, unless they are berserked, which of course they will. Unfortunately, there's a whole bunch of these Hierophants with the Great Swords of Sharpness, and a Hierophant is pretty dangerous, actually. Defense skill 19, attack skill 20. They've been point buffed, so they're etherealized, they have regen, they have all of the benefits that come from the Pangean Bless. But as I said, they've been point buffed with body ethereal, so it doesn't really matter. That said, the Enchanted Nodachi is, I believe, yeah, a magic weapon. So there you are. Not really a problem against the Dione itself. So the Dione is now in spirit form, and it's dead. Not really the damage I imagine Yomi was seeking. And to be honest, as Yomi, I probably would have stayed in the fort and forced the enemy to assault me instead, hoping that the counter thugs got caught up in the gate, rather than what they did there, which is they were overwhelmed with the white centaurs supporting. So that's probably all that she wrote for Yomi, which is not ideal for us. I mean, 6 is awesome. Like, we got good chats going with 6p, but in terms of pacing, it would be better for us if this victory happens slower, especially as we're getting our teeth punched in by a weak Lanka. Anyway, I took a barbarian province and reclaimed my 2 gems and my 3 blood slave income and 2 income from Windswept Desert. But yeah. Cool, so that's the situation we find ourselves in. The damage with Lanka is at least staunched for now. We don't even have the resources to go kill these barbarians on 49. I at least have Dominion on 4 provinces, and importantly, our first SC is online. Well, our first SC chassis is online. We can now gear it into a heavy thug or a counter thug, but it's there. God will obviously take some time yet. I'll turn 36, and we'll have to wait and see when SSG 73 wakes up. My collection of Astral Mages is growing, awaiting his arrival, because, you know, if you have a cap-only Astral Slave, you're going to have to recruit it, because you're not going to get them from anywhere else. But we've got our forts on. We're going to try and get a fort up here in Caverns of Gold, I think, so that'll be land fort, land fort, land fort, water fort, and then eventually probably water fort. But I'm also considering forting Province 8. Why would I fort Province 8? Because it is the province that controls passage from this northern area here, dominated by Pan, to the south. Without this province, people from the north can't travel south, people from the south can't travel north, unless they want to go the long way around. That makes this province strategic for movement reasons. It also controls the entrance to this cave, unless you want to kill this throne. And killing this throne is ultimately going to be a job for Ultimate Smithing Minion, because a super Telkeen with the appropriate gear and all of the spells it can cast, we're confident can probably take out a Springhawk throne without too much trouble. We'll talk about that when it's time for them to finally go in. I'm going to jump forward one more turn, and then we're going to talk about the passage of the war. It does at least seem like Saramatia is free, but Saramatia's other forts are still under siege, which suggests that Vanheim is still being Vanheim and being quite effective in doing so. At the very least, there's no more question from the elves of potentially, as they threatened in one case, violating a nap in order to send Vanir up to fight Lanka. That is no longer on their mind. And to be fair, that wasn't the elven team. That was just Feng when he was frustrated. It was very clear from Hedalas and Basil that they weren't actually planning on breaking the nap. That was just one threat from one player that was quickly withdrawn. Anyway, let's jump over to turn 21 and do a little bit of a check-in, as we like to do every 3 turns. Because I have a feeling it's worth taking stock after suffering these sort of losses. We found nothing, we took nothing, no one took anything. And what you have, this province is, I forgot if it happened last turn, but certainly this province is the first of very many plague events. I'm speaking from 2 or 3 turns in the future at this point. There's a plague that's broken out in this province. Now, this is the year of COVID-19 in our reality, but it seems like there's some sort of underwater plague shenanigans going on, because this plague that starts here, you'll see it spreads in other provinces over the next 2 to 3 turns. So Pelagia is having its own little plague problem, in addition to its disbelief problem and the fact its god still hasn't woken up and it can't find any magic gems. We're just generally not in a great way at the moment as Pelagia. But, you know, we're getting there. What have we done? Well, We're getting our research corps online. We've pulled some troops back here. Stalin has helpfully named my commander. Remember, we are memeing to make me feel better about everything that's happening over the last few turns. We're going to get a fort started here. And then the question of intervention in the Elf War continues. We're going to assess it. We're going to talk it through. Because I'm thinking that we have to get involved in some way. But at the same time, I also think that standing by the elves and supporting their endeavors is also valuable. So those two demands are really clashing. You can see here that the Great White Bull came down and counterattacked Vanheim off the peninsula entirely, something that I don't think Vanheim is going to come back and deal with in the future. So what we're going to do is, knowing that the Great White Bull is now going to go back and start hooking towards Yomi, is we're going to see if we can get away with poking some counterattacks as long as we go nowhere near the throne and make clear that's not, we're not going to do anything in that area. It's possible that our bluff will be called and the bull will hang around and make our life miserable, but we have to keep active at this point in the game. So we'll see how we go. We'll see. Hopefully the bull doesn't hook around this way. Hopefully the bull actually goes back, defends its capital, and then maybe goes around. We're going to stay active on that point. I can't capture every interaction I have in these videos. Just suffice to say that negotiating with someone who you are fighting is, in my view, very important, at least in cases where they have greater threats than you and you have a pretty weak hand, which is the duality of factors we're dealing with here. But so far as the war itself goes, the broader war, the Elf War, the big war, at this point, Fomoriya and Yomi are basically encapsulated in the Elf War. There's no sign that Pangaea stormed Yomi this turn. That'll come soon, and Yomi will be out of it. That will free up all of these Pangaean troops, and you've noticed Pangaea has occupied all these provinces. I was hoping we were going to get to Snipe 21. Didn't turn out that way. Yomi will fall, and those Pangaean troops will then be free to move north. The Fomorian siege will eventually end, and Rus will probably take Fomoriya. As for Vanheim and Sarmatia, it looks like the teammates have come in to try and bail out Sarmatia. What happened is Sarmatia deployed a communion army early on, as you'd expect. Unfortunately, it ran into more Vanheers than they expected, and they were overwhelmed and cut down. So Hinnom and have both deployed forces. These are Urgard's Enkidu soldiers and Masushus. And this is Maziks and Arvim and Dawnguard and all that sort of stuff. So Hinnom is sending forces as well to reinforce and hopefully bail out their Saramatian ally. This leaves us in the unfortunate position wherein the two people who we are most afraid of are the ones who are doing best out of the war, with the elves. The elves have taken significant losses. Archocephali has been hollowed out and reduced to basically exile at this point. Vanheim's holding, but Tin and Og is under significant pressure. And under those circumstances, I no longer regard Team Elf as particularly threatening. Certainly not the way when the coalition started. So there's obviously limits to what we can do. There's the strategic discussion which I'm having with my teammates over what our role should be in the ideal world. But the other reality is we just don't have anything to get involved with. Whatever we make happen, with the Therodian army destroyed, the Atlantean army pretty out of position, if we're going to make something happen over the next couple of turns, we're going to do it with 89 turtle warriors and Sideraspids, or whatever you say, the shield phalangite troops that aren't actually phalangites because they don't have formation fighter, and some experienced turtle warriors of First Corps up here following. Remember, we are memeing the Turtle Chief. That's what we're going to have to make this happen. So I'm going to consider the strategic situation in some more depth and consult with my team, and then we're going to make some difficult decisions over the extent to which we assist or militarily intervene in this conflict, and in what way. We have obligations to basically every party involved, but I'm confident I'm going to be able to navigate those. I think we're going to be able to navigate the diplomatic complexities. It's just going to be difficult. The one truth, however, is if we're going to make this work, we need to be very careful not to overextend, because as this experience shows, if we take our eye off the ball for 1 second, we are so weak, so under-equipped, so ill-suited to on-land warfare until our schemes come together, that it doesn't take much. The pretender of a nation, the last surviving nation in a team that is basically out of the game, came and soloed us, and that is... it's humbling. It's humbling. I'm going to see if we can talk our way out of it. What is our plan more broadly to get around this? Well, our economies are weak, but the one thing we can do is we're going to research. I'm going to hit Conjuration 5 soon. Conjuration 5 gives me full-size water elementals. I have 147 water gems. So with Conjuration 5, I'm going to do a few things. First, I'm going to voice a Tiamat my lake. Then I'm going to get a mage over to these guys, and I'm going to voice of Tiamat their lake. Most of their lake, in fact, is actually going to be in range from here. Theranos is going to make me a water lens, which will give me ritual range 6, and I can voice of Tiamat most of their lake. That should spike our gem income. And only cost, like, by the time I've spent all of these gems on voice of Tiamat, I will have made like another 140 gems. So I have gems to burn on full-size water elementals, and I think that's going to be my combat tool. The way I make full-size water elementals, obviously, is you take 4 of these guys, and you team them up with 4 of these guys, and you make a communion, you make water elementals. Or I'll do the math and figure out what the actual numbers are. Or you can get water randoms of the Pearl Mages, and just straight out do it. However, I can't afford to recruit Pearl Mages at the moment, so full-size water elementals it is. Now, those can deal with elves in small numbers. They can also deal with sparkles. For enough full-size water elementals, and I mean a lot of them, will kill sparkles, because they do AP damage. He only has 25 prot. They have multiple high damage attacks, and he can't trample them. He has to gore them. Full-size water elementals will kill sparkles. Anyway, I'm going to keep researching. I'm then going to go enchantment. Enchantment 5 will get me foul vapors, and we have poison resistance 15 in our bless. So if I create one of these guys, a Pearl King, he can foul vapors and not be in trouble himself. The only trouble becomes the troops, and we'll need to find a source of troops that won't like automatically die. That said, I plan to run all the way up to enchantment 6, and then enchantment 7, which will give me Serpent's Blessing. Enchantment 6 will give me relief, which is handy. We're gonna pick up some spells here, but I think I'm going to be enchantment. I think I'm going to be enchantment based probably. I may even go all the way up to enchantment 8 for mass regen. We'll see. The reason I want to go enchantment is because this team has divined a macro strategy. And I was about to talk about it, but you know what? I think this turn, out of respect for Sparkles, this episode will be about Sparkles. And in the next episode, we'll talk about our grand plan, which is starting to come together. I really need our gods to wake up, but we have a scheme. We have a meme. It is a complete meme. It will not win the game, but it'll be funny and it'll be somewhat viable if we can pull it off. So we'll talk about, consider that a teaser for next episode. I'll see you in turn 22, and around about turn 24, we'll start talking through game plans. See you next time.